Mr. President, were you aware that Secretary of Commerce visited Epstein's island, and do you continue to have...
No, I wasn't aware of it. No, I didn't. I actually haven't spoken to him about it. I wasn't. But from what I hear, he was there with his wife and children. And I guess in some cases, some people were. I wasn't. I was never there. Somebody will someday say that. I was never there.
All right. President Trump yesterday telling reporters he has not talked to Howard Lutnick, who admitted this week that he took his family, nannies, kids, to Jeffrey Epstein's island in 2012. And that was years after Lutnick claimed to have cut off contact with the convicted sex offender who he called gross, who also, it turns out, was his neighbor. The fallout from the Epstein files is just one of the stories that continues to dominate Washington. There are also a number of other developments surrounding the Trump administration's immigration policies, including a federal judge's sharp criticism of Operation Metro Surge in Minnesota. We'll go through that ruling, what it means. It comes as thousands of immigration officers are now set to leave the state after 6 weeks of aggressive immigration enforcement and, of course, the shooting deaths of 2 U.S. citizens, of which the feds are investigating, and they took the evidence away from the state, not allowing the state to do a complete investigation. Many feel both of those killings were pretty much execution-style murders. And new polling showing people don't like it. President Trump's approval rating is sinking in large part because of ICE operations and deportations. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, a partial government shutdown seems likely after Senate Democrats yesterday blocked 2 funding bills for the Department of Homeland Security. And then there's this, a disturbing story about a man accused of sexually abusing children. Seems there is a theme here. A man accused of sexually abusing children after he was pardoned for participating in the January 6th insurrection. Good morning and happy Friday,
You could have seen that coming. Everybody could see that coming. It's going to keep coming, too. And I will tell you, you look at that, you look at all the other news that's out right now, you look at the numbers. ICE, again, we said it, this was not politically viable for them to continue doing what they did in Minneapolis. So that's leading to the drawdown. You look at a lot of the other policies, though, just devastating for the president. We're going to show the numbers, the loss of support among independents, the loss of support among 18 to 29-year-olds. I mean, think about this. A 51-point swing. I've never heard of that in American politics before. A 51-point swing in a year's time, which means
on an issue that predominantly
this is
he campaigned on.
This is just overall.
Yeah.
And these polls, where a year into the president's term, voters are saying Joe Biden was better, and there's a spate of them out this week. Young voters have cratered. The YouGov Economist poll found Donald Trump minus 42 net approval among 18 to 29-year-olds. That's a 51-point swing from +9 at the start of the presidency. Now, Jonathan Lemire, if the president was actually listening to anybody, maybe you could trim the sails a bit here and there. But every day it's another act in a shock opera, which I don't know. I don't know. Maybe there's this belief. I know there's always been the belief, shock people, own the libs, and gain your power from their overreacting. But we're not. We understand this, and it's not owning the libs. As I've said before, if you're hitting your forehead with a ball-peen hammer, that's owning you, and that's what we're seeing in these numbers. It's just like the Pam Bondi. Everybody I've talked to, Trump supporters, Republicans who are sort of Trump curious, independents, of course, Democrats. saying that the Bondi testimony was probably the worst they've ever seen on Capitol Hill. Does that end up affecting Pam Bondi in her next election? No, because Pam Bondi's not going to have a next election. It does impact Republicans that are going to be running this fall. And you just wonder, with a 51-point drop, with the political bleeding in Texas, among Hispanics, on his strongest issues, when in the world are they going to start behaving a bit more rationally? Because right now it doesn't seem like anybody in the White House cares.
Yeah, it's a mix of stubbornness and existing solely in your own bubble, your own echo chamber. And right now, President Trump, despite pleas, louder and louder pleas from Republicans to change course, he simply won't. And he is doubling down on the deportation policies. Yes, eased up in terms of agents out of Minneapolis. OK, that's a nod to how poorly things went there. But the quota system for deportations still in place, still pushing forward with the tariffs, still refusing to engage on the Jeffrey Epstein matter, and sticking by members of his staff who, frankly, a number of Republicans would be happy to see him jettison. That includes Howard Lutnick. And then you're right about Pam Bondi. I am told that her performance on the Hill this week not well reviewed in the West Wing, but President Trump himself appreciated her fight. She was out there defending me, he has told people, and does not seem inclined to make a change. In part, that's a point of pride for him this time around, the no scalps policy. Don't give Democrats, the media, a win by firing somebody. But you're right. The polls just keep getting worse. But at least for now, President Trump, who, Joe, we talk about it a lot, has a pretty good political antenna, can read the numbers. But at least for now, he's refusing to budge.
I think that's what I don't understand. She wasn't defending him yesterday. She made a fool of herself, and that hurt him badly. All of these things hurting him badly. We're hearing Stephen Miller wants to do this or that. And Donald Trump's it's hurting Donald Trump badly. If Donald Trump has the great political instincts that we've seen him have through the years, he should recognize that what Pam Bondi did yesterday is going to make his numbers even lower. I mean, and you've been, from the very beginning of the ICE operations in Minneapolis, you've said this is going to really damage the White House politically.
Well, what's interesting is this turns out to be so far, and I'm not sure all the American people, even parts of the base, are with him on this. This is the no consequence presidency. Nobody gets fired, whether it's shielding child predators or being child predators within this administration, potentially, or whether it's execution-style killings in Minnesota, whether it's this ICE raids gone wild, all these things that he campaigned on that are turning upside down within his administration, but no accountability, none at all. And he seems completely detached from it, like I wasn't at Epstein Island, so that's all I really care about. There is a no consequence aspect to this presidency that I think might be frustrating to some people. And Pam Bondi was literally sitting with her back to victims. That picture will go down in history as her legacy. The female attorney general, a woman who makes history by nature of having that job, turning her back to victims of sexual predators, child predators, and refusing to address them in any way, refusing to agree to meet with them in any way, refusing to even confirm that they are still looking for these predators out there, predators in our midst.
Well, they're covering
in
up.
her midst.
They're covering up for the
sure.
They're redacting all of these lines. And yes, Pam Bondi, the defining picture of Pam Bondi's term will be her keeping her back turned to those women who were victimized by rich, powerful men and who they're covering for right now. It certainly seems that way. And just like with Kristi Noem, the picture will be her sitting there posing in front of human beings stacked like cattle, many of them innocent, as we're finding out.
And there's news on that.
And there's news on that today, too. So, the reason why, and I know this would be offensive for for socialists, the reason why a lot of us believe in capitalism is it's a free market. And when it's not rigged the way it's rigged right now, so monopolies get more and more powerful and billionaires get richer and richer, when there's a level playing field in capitalism, there's competition. And if you do something smart, work hard, you get rewarded. If you do something really stupid, you get punished. Well, here, because this is sort of being run more like an autocracy and a strongman's government, there is no sort of capitalist instinct inside this administration. You do something really stupid, a lot of times you get rewarded for it if you're loyal. Now, that may work in Russia. That may work in Belarus. It does not work in the United States of America, and that's why those poll numbers have collapsed by over 50 points among young voters, among independents. There have to be consequences to stupid actions inside the White House, and if not, the buck stops with the President of the United States, and that's what we're seeing.
Also with us, we have the host of Politics Nation on MS Now, Reverend Al Sharpton. He's the president of the National Action Network. Former Obama White House Communications Director Jen Palmieri is with us. And MS Now National Affairs Analyst John Heilman. He's partner and chief political columnist at Puck. So let's get right into it. Let's go to more details on the polls that you were talking about. Showing President Trump's approval rating taking a hit amid overwhelmingly unpopular immigration and deportation operations. At some point, we need to talk about these so-called detention centers, which may have another word.
They're not detention centers. They're internment camps, and they're building these internment camps all over the United States. And if anybody in the White House is stupid enough to think people are going to allow internment camps in their communities and that it's not going to cause, you think you can stop people from taking pictures, from visiting. It's just going to make the situation worse. These internment camps will end up being another devastating blow politically to Republicans. And I'm just wondering who's running things in the White House that they would put internment camps or try to put internment camps all over America. Roger Wicker, powerful Republican from Mississippi, already said, we don't want internment camps in our state. We'll see.
We're covering a lot of stories of people who are getting stuck inside those. Nobody can find them. People, pregnant mothers not getting the care they need, abuse, and a lot of lawmakers being denied access to be able to see what's happening in there. So this is another piece of this ICE puzzle.
It all feeds into this. There need to be changes in the White House or these numbers will continue to collapse.
So according to the latest AP NORC poll, his approval rating stands at 36%. That's down 4 points from just last month. A year into President Trump's second term, 3 new polls show more voters now say Joe Biden did a better job as president than Donald Trump. A Harvard-Harris poll found 51% of registered voters say Trump is doing a worse job than Biden versus 49% who say he's doing better. The latest Rasmussen poll found 48% of likely voters say Biden did a better job as president compared with 40% who chose Trump.
First of all, Joe Biden is absolutely loving this. Donald Trump's absolutely hating this right now. And again, it's self-inflicted because so many of these policies that are being pushed end up accruing to the president's detriment.
And a new YouGov Economist poll found that 46% of U.S. adults say Trump is doing a worse job than Biden, compared with 40% who say he's doing better. So Axios frames it this way, quote, Trump's net approval on the economy is 26 points lower than it was at this point in his first term, and 53 points lower among independents,
I've never seen numbers
according
like that.
to CNN polling analyst Harry Enton. Young voters have cratered. The YouGov Economist poll found Trump at minus 42 net approval among 18 to 29-year-olds, a, get this, 51-point swing from the start of his presidency. Is that a big swing in a short amount of time, or am I missing something?
I'm not really good at politics. I just sort of stumbled onto the show this morning because I can't get a gig at the MLB Network to talk about spring training. But yeah, from what I've gathered by listening to podcasts, that's a lot. John Heilman, I've never in 32, 33 years following this very closely on the Hill and all around. I have never seen 50-point swings. Here we have a 51-point swing on the economy, a 51-point swing among Gen X voters. That's in the past year. In the past year. And we could talk a lot about why that's happening. We could talk about the policies that are being conducted on ICE and people getting gunned down in the streets. We could talk about Epstein. We could talk about Pam Bondi's performance. But you and I were talking. You brought up a great point about Pam Bondi's performance. It's not just how bad it was yesterday. And it's the same thing with Howard Lutnick. It's not just that he got caught red-handed lying. It's every time people see that Pam Bondi testimony, what does it do? It keeps the Epstein files story alive. In fact, it turbocharges it. Every time people see Howard Lutnick, what are they going to be thinking? Oh, this is a guy that lied through his teeth about his relationship with Epstein, said he stopped in 2005, actually took his family to Rape Island 6 years later, moved in next door in New York. So every time you see Howard Lutnick, it's a billboard that says, ask me about the Epstein files. Every time you see Pam Bondi, it's a billboard that says, ask me about the Epstein files. I don't know how this could be managed any worse. Sometimes you just got to cut people loose from your administration.
Well, right. I mean, so much is in that, all of that, Joe. And I'll say the thing you and I and Mika have been talking about, and everybody on the show has been talking about now for, I guess it's like 7 months since the Epstein story became one of the most important central driving, animating stories in our politics, is that everything that the administration has done, and I mean that the administration, President Trump, Pam Bondi, everything they've done, has prolonged and exacerbated this scandal, and prolonged and exacerbated and given more power to this political issue. My pal Jen Palmieri's on there, and you could ask her like what the right communication strategy would have been 7 months ago, 8 months ago, 9 months ago. Can you imagine like a textbook that's more the opposite of whatever the right communication strategy would have been in this circumstance than to have Pam Bondi way back a year ago invite right-wing influencers into the White House and promise them full disclosure on the Epstein files and then not give it to them, say it was on her desk, the Epstein dossier, and then not put that forward. And then in every turn from now, and this is to bring it up to today, they have only acted guilty. That's most Americans are not watching Pam Bondi on Capitol Hill. They're sane. They're not like us. We watch these things live. You will see, I'm certain, a cold open on Saturday Night Live this Saturday making fun of Pam Bondi. And so that will get it out into the culture. But for anybody in the political class, for a Republican, a Democrat on Capitol Hill, for the survivors, for the media, everything that Donald Trump has done and that his people around him have done throughout this period, and it's only made worse by the way Pam Bondi behaved like a lunatic on Capitol Hill on Wednesday, is to make them look like they are hiding things and make them look guilty. We still don't really know what, if anything, Donald Trump did that might be illegal, that might be criminal, it might just be immoral. But the reality is, does anything that they've done make us want to see the 2 million documents that have not been released less? Or does it make us want to see them more? It makes everybody want to see them more because Pam Bondi's behavior, Donald Trump's behavior, makes it look more and more like they are hiding stuff and that Donald Trump is guilty of something. That has got to be like the most perverse political communication strategy I have ever seen in covering politics over the course of the last 30 years.
We've said it over and over again. We've said it day in and day out. Everything that they have done has done nothing but keep this story going. Any White House would have dumped it. Any smart White House would have said, here it is, here's the document dump. You know, drop all the documents on a Tuesday. People go crazy over it, like 2 weeks, for 2 weeks. And then guess what? It's over. Should have been over 6-9 months ago. Instead, it's drip, 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 drip. Here, it's hard to imagine Pam Bondi. It's hard to imagine the White House doing any worse, John Lemire. Pam Bondi said, I have a list. on my desk of these Epstein people. We have documents, all of these documents in trucks ready to release. And then Susie Wiles, several months later, goes, that's a lie. Pam doesn't have any of that stuff. And so they can't even get their story straight inside the administration. And it seems everything she's done, and especially when you won't answer any questions, when you talk about the Dow being over 50,000, when you talk about all, which is not anymore, we talk about all of those other things, and you don't want to talk about women being raped or women being sexually trafficked or women being abused.
Something she campaigned on years ago.
Island. That you can't talk about that when that's what the MAGA base wanted. Then, yeah, all you're doing is fanning the flames, and all they've done is fan the flames over 6 months instead of getting this story behind them.
Yeah, Bondi made the claims that she had the material on her desk, and they presented the binders to these sort of right-wing influencers. That was a year ago. That was last February. And then the story did fade for a couple of months, and it came roaring back over the summer. And I was just looking up. I talked to a Republican operative who said they're handling this, I'm paraphrasing just slightly, about as badly as you can in terms of extending the story. That was in July. And here we are in February. It has gotten that much worse. And Jen Palmieri, it's not just, the horrors that are in these emails. And first and foremost, of course, we keep our thoughts with the victims. But it also reinforces what a lot of people think about this administration. And I want to talk to you briefly about what Senator Jon Ossoff said over the weekend, where he called it the Epstein class, which is a sort of a shorthand for, yes, this perhaps predatory behavior, but also these elites who are looking down on you, who are mocking you, who are doing well when you're not. And this is part of, I think, it's not just bad on its own merits for this administration, but it reinforces everything else, too.
Yeah, it's like the chumminess of it all, right? I mean, Howard Lutnick, I stopped by his island on the way of presumably on some other yacht, I guess, on his summer vacation with his kids and all of their nannies, and that's the explanation. I'll say one thing, John's like, I don't think a lot of people talk about Pam Bondi. I spent a lot of time out in America and was in the South the last few days, and people are talking about Pam Bondi. I mean, you hear it at at restaurants, and these are not Democrats that are expressing concern about it. And I think it is, when we talk about the incompetence, in terms of how they've managed it. John said, John asked for my input earlier on that, so I'll follow up, John. It's bumbling incompetence from Bondi and Kash Patel, and like we talked about last year, right? And how they're like, we have it, and been showing it off when they don't actually know what's in there. And then the weird thing is the behavior from the president, right? Because it's just you. Even that little clip you showed about him reacting to Howard Lutnick, that guy is never prepared. He was clearly on a script when he said, I haven't talked to Howard Lutnick about it. Somebody told him it's important that you say that, because maybe that thinks that triggers, congressional questions or something. But he acts in a way he does with no other issue, guilty and scared. And when the communications strategy doesn't make any sense, look to the person at the top to understand why why it's going that way.
Yeah.
And I think you just have to look at Trump.
Yeah. Jen, I've always told my children that when something doesn't make sense, there's a reason why it doesn't make sense. And none of this makes sense. The way they've handled this just doesn't make sense. I want to ask you, and then have Rev respond to this, and then John. A number that Heilman and I keep talking about that stand out is his collapse of support among really Donald Trump's base, and that is non-college voters. He's down 20-25% with non-college voters. I connect this to the Epstein class. Also connect this to calling affordability a hoax. So many of these voters are the same voters that can't afford their rent, can't afford their health care, can't afford to send their kids to college, can't afford the things that they thought they were going to be able to afford to pursue the American dream. And when you start seeing non-college voters support for Donald Trump and Republicans cratering, that's the 5-alarm fire, right?
Well, because there's something at the base of that, too, right? It's that because non-college voters have been moving to Republicans for a while now. And if they see that there is nothing underneath that their belief that Donald Trump and the Republicans were on their side, and that the evidence is very much to the contrary. And, I'll add something to your list. How about canceling the Gateway Project, right? There are hundreds of workers that got layoff notices that said don't report to work on Monday because Trump is just holding the money because he wants an airport in Virginia named after him. All of the clean energy projects that were underway, the wind projects that were underway, people have lost their jobs because of this. And this does not go unnoticed among working class voters. So I think that it's not just bad news for the Trump administration. It suggests something larger is collapsing in how they're looking at the two parties.
I also think that people do not realize it is natural for people to identify with something that reflects them. I've been in civil rights all my life. People would fight saying that could be my kid if it's Trayvon Martin or something like. We look at these victims. These victims are young children that look like some of the people in the base of Donald Trump. And they're saying, wait a minute, that could be my daughter. Or the two victims in Minneapolis, that could be my daughter. So I think the fact that they can relate to the victims here, that you can't other them, is hurting Trump and Trump's base. The other part of this, there's a scripture in Proverbs, 6th chapter. You are ensnared by the words of your mouth. They made Epstein and bring the Epstein files out. They made that an issue. So they're being ensnared by their own issue. They put it out there. They campaigned on it. Now they're coming back to reap what they sowed. And I have a fellow preacher now in Reverend Mika. We can preach this on Sunday because oh yeah, you preached on yesterday. I was jumping up and down. But clearly they made this an issue, and that's what's come to haunt them. And how do you tell people that you got excited about this Epstein issue, that all of a sudden we're not answering, we're stonewalling, I don't know anything, and the Epstein class is all over my cabinet?
Yeah, it's not just that they made it an issue, it was one of the issues. You kept talking about sexual trafficking, child trafficking. You kept having conspiracy theories, people showing up at pizza joints, shooting places up. You had movies out about a guy, and I heard this like a year or so ago. Oh, there's this guy who's a hero, and he went out and they made a movie about him for breaking up, child trafficking rings. Ends up, he was charged with improper behavior. Our people were saying that he conducted, but there was just this obsession, rightfully, on child trafficking, rightfully. But what happened to it? Where did it go? MTG still cares about child trafficking in the MAGA base. Who else does? What? I don't get it. Thomas Massie still cares about child trafficking. But are you really telling me that people that were obsessing about child trafficking and just making up shit every day about Hollywood stars, about famous people being like aliens and child predators and all of this other stuff, they suddenly just go dark, go quiet, because now they don't want to know the truth? Now, we've actually got the truth right there. It's out there. It's in the hands of Pam Bondi. But have you lost interest? Is suddenly sexual predators, is that all right with you now? Because it sure as hell wasn't before. And just to remind you, friends, I started talking about this in 2015, 2016, asking why Jeffrey Epstein was still on the streets. saying it made absolutely no sense to me. How did he get that sweetheart deal? So, so just save your old, no, we cared.
Yeah.
We cared about it. We talked about it. We were confounded by it. I guess you decided to start talking about it not because you cared about children, but because you just cared about politics. And the only reason I would say that is because you don't seem to care now. Mm-hmm. Where are you? Because all these people that were talking to me about it, they're not talking about it anymore. Maybe that's because you know. It's up. The truth's out there, and you got an attorney general that doesn't want that truth out. It must be hard to live that way.
All right, we're going to continue
Kind of helps
this
if you're
conversation.
always against child predators, always against sexual exploitation, always against the rich and the powerful using their position to exploit younger women. I don't know.
Still ahead on Morning Joe, the Trump administration's deportation